guys, welcome back. Let's talk a bit more about the turbo in this 5SFE. It was a struggle with this. So as you guys know, I went through, rebuilt the motor, put it all back in, got all the fire damage cleaned up, got the car actually up and running. Ended up having to replace the hood because the hood had a whole bunch of fire damage. I could have got the hood repainted, but I started looking at costs and it was going to be cheaper just to get a brand new hood instead of going with repainting the old one. So I ended up getting a nice little vented carbon fiber hood. That one worked out really well. Still have it to this day. Ended up getting it from, I think it was VIS. So definitely a good hood, really just kind of bolted right on. Latch worked right in the place it needed to work. I mean, everything was just pretty much bolted on stock. So ended up doing that, ended up going with an external wastegate for the turbo. Ended up using a Turbo Smart external Ultra Gate. That one worked out okay. Problem I was running into with it was this T3, T4 hybrid turbo. Man, it was really laggy. It was just really laggy. I mean, it was to the point where I was only really feeling the boost on the freeways. And that wasn't any fun. It just didn't seem like a fun ride to do that. So I ended up switching over to a CT26, ended up grabbing one of those, putting that on. It was really responsive because the T3, T4 turbo was spooling at about 3,500 RPMs. The CT26 was spooling right around 2,500 RPMs. You gotta go, dog! So car actually was nice to be driven around town, because what's the point of having a turbo if you're only going to feel boost when you're on the freeway? I wanted to be able to feel it when I was, start and stop in town, driving around, having a good time, just be able to feel it anywhere I was going. So that was really nice. And so I was screwing around one time, driving around town, ended up figuring out that with all this extra boost, I need something to make the car stop. So found out that the two-pot Avalon calipers off, I believe, the 94 to 97 Avalon bolt directly on to the Celica. So that took me from a one-piston caliper up to a two-piston caliper. So then I had a lot more stopping power. I believe they said it was something like 26% more stopping power with those calipers. And it was easy bolt on, same rotors used, same brakes pads were used, but you had more clamping force. So, and then from there, just took it around driving back roads, having a good time. Still having some issues because every time I'd go into boost, the piggyback would just, it would just make the car run super rich, and I'd just be spitting black smoke out the back of the car. And so that was just getting a little old. But driving around, and I end up bumping into a guy, waves me down on one of these back roads. He's in an SC400, and he's like, "Hey man, I like your car. Have you ever thought of taking it out to the track?" And I was like, "To the track? I never thought of the track." And he was like, "Yeah, there's a track out in Deming, which is about 35-40 minutes away from us. It's called the Royal Seco Raceway. They got a track day coming up. You should go." So ended up having some problems with the car. Wasn't able to get it out to that track day. But a couple months later, pulled a couple friends together from work, and we ended up going out there, and man, was it a blast. And it was a great community, great group of guys out there. I think that's what ended up getting me into tracking cars, is just being out there. And not once, with all those fast cars and everybody out there having a good time, did I feel I was in danger. Everybody was really helpful, gave tips, pointing out problems with your car, things that you need to fix, things that you could improve on. I mean, it was a great time. We had a lot of fun out there, and I think that just kind of got me that racing bug. But driving out there, first thing I realized was my tires weren't up to snuff and my suspension wasn't up to snuff. So I started working on the suspension. And also, while I was at the track, I learned that I was getting a lot of torque steer. And front-wheel drive cars, it's gonna happen. You're gonna get torque steer. And I was like, I gotta figure out a way to fix this, and do some reading around. It's like, oh, put an LSD in the transmission, because front-wheel drive cars, the differential and the transmission is all one unit. So I started looking around, and I was looking at the cost of all these aftermarket LSDs, and I was like, man, these are kind of expensive, and it seemed like it's gonna be a lot of work. And then I ended up finding out that the LSD out of the MR2 Spider, I think it also was in the Lotus, one of the Lotus cars. It drops right in. All you have to do is take the gear off the old LSD, put it on the new one. It drops right in, and it's a Toyota TRD OEM LSD. And I was like, oh man, this is gonna be great. I gotta do this. And so ended up picking up one of those, finding one up on eBay for a pretty good price. A guy had a whole bunch he's trying to get rid of. I think he's still trying to get rid of even more. I might just grab one for a spare transmission down the road, but dropped it in, made a big difference, so I wasn't getting so much of that torque steer. I still get a little bit now. You'll still feel it jerk a little bit, but before it was to the point where sometimes the wheel was just, it was crazy. I tried to jerk the wheel out of my hand, and that was not very safe, and that wasn't gonna be very good, especially for the power goals I was shooting for. So I had to fix this problem with the ECU. The piggyback wasn't working, so I ended up going standalone, and I ended up grabbing a Mega Squirt. Was it DIY PMP, one of those build-yourself ones. Never had any experience in soldering, but a couple YouTube videos, and I learned how to solder. Soldered together the board, put it all together. It was plug and play, so it slapped right into the factory harness, pretty much replaced the stock ECU. And load the software on there, load the firmware load the software onto your laptop, load the firmware onto the ECU, and it's good to go. And so I was able to play around with that. Ended up finding out that a good feature to have was the auto-tune feature. You pay an extra like $30-40 for the software, and the feature will actually tune your AFRs when you're out driving based off of what your target map is. So you set up a target AFR map, and it just tunes off of that. So I was able to get somewhat of a decent tune on there, and I was able to drive around and have a good time. Worked with the guys off 6GC, and I was able to come up with a timing map that was very, very conservative, very, very safe, and just continue to drive the car. Decided to put some aftermarket cams in there. Ended up going with the cams from I can't remember the name, but I'll look it up. I'll pop it up here somewhere. And man, those cams, I mean, they actually helped get the torque up and get the power up a little bit more. What was great about these cams was that what you did is you sent in your stock factory cams out to these guys. They would regrind and weld them and give you more lift, more duration, and make the car just turn to a completely different car. So ended up doing all that, having a good time with the car, and then at a certain point I developed some rod knock, and I was just like, so I had to develop rod knock on a newly rebuilt engine. I was just like, and so I started doing some looking, like tore apart the motor, find out, I've never built a motor before. This is my first time doing it, and I didn't clearance the bearings properly. And you don't clearance the bearings properly, eventually they're gonna wear down, and then one of them spun. Dang it! And then it started knocking. It started like a light little ticking, and then all of a sudden it was blah, 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 and motor was done. And it's one of those things where you learn as you go. They always talk about that you're not a good tuner, you're not a good engine builder unless you've blown up one motor. Well, there's my one motor that I blew up. So it's one of those things where it was a learning experience, and I'm glad I went through it. I wish I wouldn't have messed that up, but it helped me learn. It helped me take what I learned, and I applied it to when I built the SC300, and I was not afraid, I was not scared of anything. When I went through and built that motor, I knew how to clearance everything right, and I knew how to put everything together how it should be. Crap. What am I gonna do? Took the engine apart, tried to rebuild it a couple times, and I just couldn't get it right. And it got to a stage where I was finding like this turbocharged 5SFE is just not gonna work. I need to go with something different, and that's when I made the decision that I'm gonna do a 3SGT 4th gen swap.